Hello, everyone, wherever you're at, and welcome to the opening of the Stop Annexation and Occupation campaign by the WCC that will run until 11 June. The webinar today is the opening, and we have two distinguished speakers who will give us the practical aspects from the ground. And the webinar is meant to find solutions and pave the path for a just peace in Palestine and Israel, and to find windows of opportunity for change and ways to open those windows without really looking at the practical aspects and how we can break the cycle of violence and forge a new reality. The whole world is missing the prophetic voice that we are trying to provide. The audience, I understand, are beginning to stream in. You are welcome to write your questions in the Q&A section. Without further ado, I would like to turn to Reverend Dr. Kenneth Mtata, Program Director, Life Justice and Peace of the WCC. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, George. Dear friends, colleagues, and partners in this work of life, justice, and peace, it is my honor to welcome you to this important webinar, marking the opening of a global campaign that will run until 11 June. Together, we aim to expose the ongoing illegality of the occupation of Palestine, an occupation sustained through forced displacement, de facto annexation, and systemic discrimination, and to highlight its devastating human impact on the vulnerable populations of Palestinian communities. This campaign stands firmly in the tradition of the World Council of Churches' deep commitment to nonviolence and justice, a commitment that was partly shaped by the Decade to Overcome Violence, the initiative running from 2001 to 2010, which invited churches and faith communities worldwide to work for reconciliation, challenge violence in all forms, and support those whose lives are challenged by different forms of discrimination and indignity. One of the clearest expressions of this Decade to Overcome Violence was the Ecumenical Accompaniment Programme in Palestine and Israel, EAPPI, which the World Council of Churches supported since its launch in 2002. EAPPI brings international ecumenical accompaniers to live in solidarity with Palestinian communities under occupation. These volunteers bear witness to human rights violations, support local peace builders, and advocate globally for an end to occupation. Their testimonies have been vital in exposing daily injustices and in reminding the world of our shared human responsibilities. Our campaign is guided by the landmark International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion of 19 July 2024, in which reaffirmed that the occupation that began in 1967 is illegal. The opinion calls not only on Israel to end occupation, but also on all states to take active steps to ensure compliance with international law. This must be a turning point, legally, morally, and politically. Through this campaign, we pursue three key goals. First, to engage governments, churches, international organizations, and civil society to prevent further annexation. Second, to tell the stories of Palestinian communities who continue to live under oppression. And third, to insist on respect for international law, human rights, and faith-based solidarity. As people of faith, we believe in the power of truth, justice, and moral courage. The World Council of Churches, inspired by its decades of witness, including the work through ecumenical accompaniment of people in Palestine, we continue to stand with the oppressed and to work for a peace that is just, sustainable, and grounded in human dignity. So we move forward together with a clear vision, with a shared commitment and in a common hope. We hope that you are going to join in this important campaign. Thank you, and you are all welcome to be part of the process.
Thank you, Reverend, for these words of inspiration and wisdom. And definitely it should be part of the path forward. I, at this point, have the honor and pleasure to introduce Michael Sfard. Mr. Sfard is our first speaker on the subject of legal implications of current political reality for the occupied population. He is a distinguished Israeli lawyer specialized in international human rights law and international humanitarian law. His law office was established in 2004 and has since been the legal advisor to human rights and peace organizations. He represents Palestinian communities as well as Israeli and Palestinian activists. Mr. Sfard is a commissioner at the International Commission of Jurists. He is an author of numerous articles about Israel and Palestine and author of the book, The Wall and the Gate, Israel, Palestine, and the Legal Battle for Human Rights. And I remind the audience, you are welcome to put your questions in Q&A. After we hear both speakers, we will open the opportunity to have both of them answer together. Mr. Sfard, please.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure and honor to participate in this webinar. My relationship with the World Council of Churches goes ways back, and I'm proud to have been involved in some of your work and to contribute for my knowledge and expertise. I would like to dedicate the few minutes that I have to have an overview of three, because the situation in Palestine is really in some way chaotic, and there are so many processes in parallel that are going on very, very rapidly. And the description of what's going on the ground a month ago is not true to how it is today. And unfortunately, it seems that in a week, things would be even worse. So I would like to dedicate the few minutes that I have to three processes that have legal implications and that are extremely important to be aware of, which completely change the character of the Israeli domination over the Palestinian territory and present a big challenge to those who believe in equality, in the human spirit, in the sanctity of life, and in the need for immediate Palestinian freedom and independence. So the three, I will say from the start, that the three are the process of annexation, the de jure annexation, the legal annexation that the West Bank is going through. And the second issue that I would touch is the issue of forced transfers and maybe even deportations. And the third would be Jewish supremacy and apartheid. And these are all processes that have legal implications, which I'll try to lay down. So regarding the first issue of the annexation, which is the issue also mentioned in the World Council of Churches campaign now, for 57 years, Israel has dominated the West Bank in a military regime, in a military rule. The idea was to show as if Israel adheres to international laws of occupation, which are part of international laws of war. International law prescribes the character of a regime of occupation as one that is temporary administration of the territory. It's not sovereignty. The occupier should not make long-term changes and should aspire to end its domination over that land. It should act as a for the welfare of the occupied people who have lost their government, who have no whose civil and political rights have been suspended, so they don't have the right to vote and to be elected and to participate in government. The very small number of safeguards that were placed in this international law regime of occupation, which is not democratic by definition, is that this government should not be a direct rule by the government of the occupying power, in this case, Israel. The occupying power, the government of the occupying power, is not directly managing the occupied territory, but it does so by an organ, in this case, the Israeli military, that yes, is under control of the Israeli government, but there is some kind of a buffer zone between the two. The type of things that the Israeli army is supposed to take into considerations when it makes decisions and carries out its administrative powers in the occupied territory are not the same as the government of Israel, which is completely bound to advance only Israeli interests. The occupier should not advance its own interests except security in the occupied territory. So for 57 years, the regime in the West Bank was completely military. The commander was the executive, the legislator, and of course, and the executive, legislator, and the judiciary of the occupied territory. All branches of government have been consolidated within the military. What we've seen with the last year is a complete revolution in the governance system over the West Bank. After East Jerusalem was illegally, unlawfully annexed in 1967, completely directly breaching a very important prohibition set in international law after the Second World War, a prohibition that is meant to make sure that aggressors are not incentivized to go on wars of occupation and expansion. So after Israel has annexed the East Jerusalem, it has now annexed the West Bank, but in a different way. Instead of applying its own laws in a carpet way on the West Bank, it created a transfer of administrative powers from the army to a branch of the Israeli Ministry of Defense that is headed by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. So an apparatus of like a mini government was created within the Ministry of Defense, which is completely civilian. It's part of the government, the Israeli government apparatus, and that apparatus is now holding the powers, the administrative powers, almost all administrative powers that in the past were at the hands of the military. This is a huge change, because that means that settlers, for example, that vote to the Israeli parliament, in the past they had an indirect effect over the policies and practices the army has put in place in the West Bank, but it was indirect through the government they elect. Now they have a direct impact on the people who govern the territory. Their congressmen, their members of Knesset are the ones who are holding the administrative powers in the West Bank. So the imbalance of power between Palestinian residents of the West Bank and the Israeli settlers, which has always been huge, is now becoming even worse. The annexation also means that public institutions, public authorities in the West Bank and public authorities in Israel are being unified. So all kinds of powers like regulating higher education in the West Bank, things of that sort, are now the powers are moving to the relevant Israeli authorities, creating authorities that have jurisdiction between the river and the sea. This process was not hidden from the eyes of the International Court of Justice, and in its advisory opinion of July 19th, it made a reference to that. And one of the reasons that the International Court of Justice has concluded that the Israeli presence in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in the Gaza Strip is unlawful and should be ended immediately is exactly because Israel has violated the prohibition on annexation of occupied territory, and thus attacked a very central prohibition that is cementing the aspiration of the human race after the Second World War to eradicate as much as possible wars by, again, not incentivizing wars of aggression. So the de jure annexation is here. And now when third-party countries, when countries are having contracts and treaties with Israel and have joint ventures with the government of Israel, they must examine whether these contracts also affect and assist and contribute to the Israeli unlawful presence in the West Bank. As Reverend Mtata has mentioned before, the International Court of Justice has made it clear that there are positive obligations on the entire international community to make sure that they are not directly or indirectly providing assistance to the Israeli unlawful presence in the West Bank. So that's one issue, the annexation. The second issue I wanted to discuss is the forced transfers and potentially even deportations. Since October 7th, more than 60 communities, Palestinian communities, mostly very small, vulnerable, weakened communities, hamlets, have been forcibly displaced. Some of them at a gunpoint, others by making their life so miserable that they had to flee, they had to leave the place where they inhabited for many years. Israel is pushing the entire Palestinian society into its very small and packed, built-up urban enclaves. The Jordan Valley, the South Mount Hebron, the Jerusalem periphery, all these areas which are the open spaces of the West Bank, where most villagers and some herding communities live, are all under a threat of displacement. Now, under international law, a forced transfer, meaning a transfer from one place to another place within the territory, is a war crime. When it is done on large scale, when it is an attack in a widespread manner on the civilian population, it becomes even a worse kind of international crime, a crime against humanity. And unfortunately, I have to say that this is what we're witnessing. We're witnessing the unfolding of a crime against humanity in the West Bank, of a forced transfer of communities, of full communities, from where they lived for generations, decades, and they are left completely without any space to live. They go at the outskirts of the villages or cities, and they are completely neglected there. I cannot fail to mention Gaza. And to be honest, I should have started with Gaza. What is happening in Gaza, I'm sure you all know. I don't need to tell you what's going on in Gaza. But when we talk about forced transfers, the current Israeli new offensive that started this weekend has engraved in its command, the command of the new offensive lists several aims. One of the aims is to concentrate, I quote, concentrate and mobilize the civilian population of the Strip to an area designated that is probably 1/4 or 1/5 of the area of the Strip. This is an aim, this is a goal, this is not a means, to distance civilians from the war zone so that they could be protected and then move back once hostilities are over. This is considered and defined as an aim. What will be done with all these people, more than 2 million, once they are concentrated in this designated small area and packed there? Well, the army command doesn't say what will happen with them, but the Israeli leaders do say, and what they say is chilling. They are planning on deporting. Deportation under international law is the forced transfer of people beyond the borders of the territory. And Israeli leaders are openly discussing transferring hundreds of thousands of people to other states as if it was human waste that has to be dumped somewhere else. As an Israeli, as a Jew, I just cannot fathom how Jewish generals and Jewish ministers are able to talk and think even of such things. So this is a major issue that is unfolding, and this has to be stopped. If there is any meaning whatsoever to our commitment, the international community's commitment, promise after the Second World War that atrocities would no longer be allowed and that the international community would stop atrocities, then this atrocity must stop. And the last thing, I see the time, and you asked the lawyer to speak for 15 minutes. It's very difficult but I'll do my best. The last thing I want to say that all of this is the engine of all of this. And again, I'm saying it with much embarrassment and shame as a Jew, as an Israeli, but much of the engine for all of this is the notion and the ideology of Jewish supremacy. Yes, there is also the issue of the atrocities committed against Jews and Israelis on October 7th, which are unforgivable and have been crimes against humanity on a large scale, things that are chilling and cannot happen in this world. And Israelis are post-traumatic about it. But there is a group of Israelis within Israel that is advancing an ideology of Jewish supremacy. For them, it's not just revenge. For them, it's not just post-traumatic syndrome. For them, this is an opportunity. And one of the ministers for one of these messianic parties has actually said, we're living in a time of miracle. That's what she said. So Jewish supremacy is being consolidated by several ways. One is to dilute the Palestinian presence in Gaza, and sorry for the expression dilute, but that's what they're trying to do, and in the open lands of the West Bank, and also in East Jerusalem. And the second is by legally strengthening the dual legal system, the double standard, in which when I go to the West Bank, Israeli law, very modern, very liberal, applies to me, and my Palestinian clients that I meet, and military draconian law applies to them. So these are our challenges. From this abyss, we must rise and hope and do what we can in order for the future to be different than the one that is sketched for us by the Israeli government. I have much more to say, but I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Probably the question and answer period afterwards will provide us with more opportunity to hear. Thank you, Michael. And we will come back to you definitely with more questions are already streaming in. At this point, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Randa Siniora, will focus on impact of the occupation on Palestinian women. Ms. Siniora is a leading activist for women's rights and Palestinian human rights. She has documented human rights violations against Palestinians for 3 decades. Her work is focused on advocacy and networking for progressive change in civil society organizations, as well as UN agencies and governments. Ms. Siniora is currently General Director of the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling in Jerusalem, and had served as Senior Executive Director of the Palestinian Independent Commission for Human Rights, and as well as General Director of Al-Haq, Law and the Service of Man. Looking forward to hearing your valuable input, Ms. Siniora. Thank you very much. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, George, for this introduction. And thank you for inviting me for this important campaign and this webinar to speak about a very important issue, which I see it very much linked with a very important legal introduction that Mr. Michael Sfard has given to us. Living under a prolonged belligerent occupation, such a long military occupation for 57, almost 60 years, I always believed that there was continuous occupation with creeping annexation. It's not only that the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights were clearly cut in 1967 taking place, de jure annexation. We've seen a de facto annexation gradually with the expansion of settlements and the moving of the occupying population to the occupied territory, which is illegal under international humanitarian law, international law generally. And we know that this really has implications on all the Palestinian civilian population, especially on women. Giving me now the chance to speak about, I just want also to add one more point, which links to Mr. Sfard's speaking out about the de facto annexation of the West Bank. I strongly believe that Israel now is trying to implement a creeping annexation through indirect ways, through lately on the 11th of May this year, the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved a proposal by Finance Minister Smotrich to resume the land registration process in the occupied West Bank. And really, this means that under the pretext of land settlements, we are going to see more of the land being expropriated, expropriation of land by force and by indirect ways of an occupied territory. And that is really is going to create facts on the ground. Perhaps during the first Trump administration, when there was approval of moving into the annexation of Area C, but specifically the Jordan Valley, we have seen that there has been, a lot of protests, and people were, there was public opinion against that, and we were able to conduct advocacy work towards stopping that jure annexation so this, I think, I'm calling it creeping annexation, because I believe that this is a very subtle way to legalize the possession of the land and to take it from its people through different projects, being land, government land, or land property that is of absentees, of you cannot prove your documentations that you own the land, you're not cultivating the land, etc. And the result will be the result is what we see now. Of trying to expropriate more land and expand on settlements and all what entails on that. I don't want really to, although we are basically, in 2019-20, we focused on the gendered impact of the attempts to annex the Jordan Valley, the de jure, because de facto is going on all the time, the de jure annexation of the Jordan Valley. And we have been able to collect a lot of data to highlight how this gendered impact is on women who are really working, cultivating the land, taking care of the livestock, and are being in direct clashes with the military and settlers in the most fertile land of the Jordan Valley, and the expropriation of water resources, the management of the households and the agricultural land, with Israel expropriating all water resources and constraining the resources for the Palestinian population who live on that has created a lot of hardships on all the civilian population, but specifically on Palestinian women who have to carry the brunt of the Israeli policies with all what it really entails. In the study that we've conducted, we have given testimonies of women on how to manage the limited water resources, to provide for the hygiene of the family, especially for young women, young girls, and how the restrictions of movement and the closure of the areas and the control through the checkpoint system, and all of that have really entailed a lot of suffering and disproportionate impact on Palestinian women specifically. The testimonies, the evidence-based data that we get is that is a means to amplify the voices of women and their sufferings, but also in their own voices, and that's how we try to engage women to speak about their own experiences being under the Israeli different policies. And I'm saying it's exacerbated because patriarchal structures very much with colonial occupation work together and enforce each other. And this is what we can and have a lot of evidence that I can go on and on with a lot of data that we have, which really brings in the stories of women suffering from the Israeli policies, and how that is strengthened also with the patriarchal structures and giving even privilege to men in some situations over women. And that's why we think that as the added value that we can bring in to all what we do is bring in the gendered impact. And because we believe that what is happening is really deepening the existing gender inequalities. Coming back to giving some examples, I need to go back to Gaza because Gaza now is at a threshold of collapsing with starvation, with the prevention of humanitarian aid entering into the Gaza Strip for over 11 weeks now. And we have, I think, to build on the momentum of yesterday's movement of the European countries who finally realize that they have legal and moral obligations under international law. And I think this is the momentum for us to see how we can move on that with bringing some examples of the suffering of women. Women, I'm saying, are suffering most because they are the gender inequalities are disproportionately affecting them, especially those who are now heading the households, the adolescent girls, the most vulnerable groups, older women. Women are within traditional roles are the caregivers. Now with the increase in disabilities and with the caring of the elderly and so on, the burdens on women are getting more difficult with the killing of the men and so on. This really means that there are increase in the suffering and the responsibilities of women to earn the necessities of the life when there is really a man-made televised famine or starvation that the Palestinian people are suffering from, with all infrastructures, including the medical infrastructure, the continuous movement and displacement, forced displacement. Every time we're talking times and again of families moving from one place to the other, looking for security, and there's no place for security. Today, I was told by one of my colleagues in Gaza that she cannot attend a meeting because, of course, she doesn't have an internet and they have difficulties in finding charging for, but because they are on the move and their neighborhood, one side of their neighborhood were forced by the Israeli military before this new aggressive military operation start on them, are forced to leave their communities. And she said that we are preparing ourselves to be asked again Palestine. We're on the other side of this neighborhood, and we will be moving to southern part of the Gaza Strip one more time. Some have of the women who have given testimonies to us spoke about over 20 times of forced displacement and moving for safety for nowhere. There's no safe haven in the Gaza Strip. Everywhere, they are really waiting for their turn to be killed. I'm saying that because you know that the majority of the casualties are among women and children, and just to give you an example, and we are not numbers, and every life has a meaning to us, of course, but we are talking about a woman being killed every hour. Almost approximately 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, we have a woman being killed. We have seen highest casualties among those who are injured, and then the whole burden of taking care of the injured and the grievances that are coming from that. The families are trying to be in the same place for their safety, and they say, if we die together. And therefore, they're trying to be in the tent, in the shelters, the overcrowdedness, the absence of privacy, the threat of increase of violence and harassment is being recorded and is being documented by WICLAC. That shows that we are more vulnerable. Standing in the queue, sometimes they are asked not to stand in the queue for getting, for providing sexual services. And maybe I shouldn't speak about that because now under this genocidal crimes that are being committed against the Palestinian people and the attempt to ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, we shouldn't speak about the internal issues. But because of believing that they enforce each other, I think that is creating additional burdens and problems to women, definitely, with forced, with difficulties of women in the reproductive, women menstruating with no hygiene, without clean water, and with all the implications, with the absence of dignity kits. All of these issues are impacting. Many women have given birth in very difficult situations under the doorstairs of their homes, or in the shelters, or in the streets, to say it, without anesthesia when they have C-sections. And many of them have been suffering from that. And that's why we go back to the Genocidal Convention and say that the prevention of birth within the group, and that was without allowing medical equipment to facilitate labor and birth to women, without incubators for immature babies that are born. And with all these implications, we've seen a lot of women who have gone through a C-section without anesthesia and sometimes lost their wombs and prevented from the right to giving birth anymore. And some of them also who were hoping of the IVF process, with the bank being completely distracted, have lost the hope forever for giving birth to or having the hope for those families to have children. The medical situation, people with chronic diseases, and all of that, I can go on and on. I think we don't have time to go and dwell into all of these examples. But in general, the health system and the reproductive services have been tremendously impacted, with malnutrition being very high on the children and the lactating mothers. And we have a lot of testimonies of mothers not finding the formula for their children, without also all the needs of a newborn babies who are at the threat. Now, the UN is stating that around 14,000 children are at the threat of dying if the humanitarian aid is not provided to the Gaza Strip. The examples, you hear them all the day, and I don't really want to dwell into that, but and I have a lot of testimonies, but I want to say that the fear, the psychological impact on the daily, on being in that situation is also creating long-term, not only short-term. Imagine nobody is have time to mourn their beloved ones, and they don't have time to bury them even sometimes when they are scattered. The bodies are being scattered all around the places. What the people are seeing will have a long-term impact on our society and our future as Palestinians, and that's why this craziness, these crimes should immediately be stopped. You cannot punish a civilian population through preventing food, water, electricity, fuel for running hospitals, for running clinics, for movement of the people. And the Gaza Strip is a situation that is unprecedented since the World War, since maybe the Second World War. This is a situation, but the dangerous thing is that these genocidal acts are taking place in front of the eyes of the people. And it's only yesterday that we saw some of the European countries a little bit moving in their speaking about the association agreement, despite being very late and despite their acceptance, their moral acceptance of. We don't want to speak about the legal, the moral acceptance of such a catastrophic situation. Moving now is important because they will consider ending this association agreement or threatening to end it. But that is going to be a long procedure, and I hope it doesn't take that long before the international community moves on and the UN Security Council takes measures to stop the atrocities of our people in the Gaza Strip. Also, I wanted to mention that in the West Bank, we are talking about over 40,000 or 45,000 families that have been forced to displacement in the northern part of the West Bank. And the plan, in my opinion, is that gradually the refugee camps, Jenin refugee camp and other camps, after the measures taken against UNRWA, are going to be merged into the cities, main cities of Jenin and Tulkarem and so on. And therefore, while all the population are being suffering now, the atrocities of these people who are either lost their homes or are not able to return back to their homes, with the Israeli policies to completely dismantle Palestinian refugee camps in the north and gradually moving, in my opinion, to other refugee camps in the West Bank, we are facing another forced displacement. I'm trying to translate what Mr. Sfard spoke in a legalistic language, more to speaking about specific examples of the suffering of the people, specifically women, who again have to disproportionately manage a family through their traditional roles without the presence of the minimal needs of those families, with economic hardships, with losses of lives that are not being noticed in the West Bank, and the continuous raiding of different villages and towns and imposing curfews. Lately, now we are talking about Brooklyn, near western of Salfit, being under Israeli military curfew for a week, and they are killing people many times, often in cold blood, and the loss of shelter and safety for the families who have been uprooted from their homes without warning or leading or this overcrowdedness on the people. So just to speak, to wrap up in order not to take more time, we have a lot of testimonies that we can share with you. I just want to end up with one of our testimonies from one of the women, Rima, a 58-year-old mother of 5 who lives in the Hebron area, in the old city of Hebron. She says what worsened our suffering inside the home was the escalation of attacks by settlers. Settler violence and vandalism is terror, I would say, settler terror with a free hand after and armed after the 7th of October have led to a lot of, loss of property, vandalism, damage, and destruction of agricultural land. The attacks included arrests and beatings and torture. The abuse of soldiers and settlers also involved throwing garbage at us, pouring sewage and contaminated water, and shouting sexually offensive insults. fearing for the safety, I was forced to marry off my 4 daughters at an early age and move them outside the Tel El-Meida area. She lives in the Tel El-Meida inside the old city of Hebron to protect them from the relentless harassment. So now she has Safa, 16 years old. Raja was married at 16 years old. Fida, 17 years old. And Wafa at 15 years old. This is how patriarchal structures and colonial occupation enforce each other. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Randa Siniora, for the input, which really translates precisely what we are trying to do in this campaign, is to explain the legal terms and at the same time to unpack the impact on ordinary people. And this is why we wanted to hear the story of oppressed women. And indeed, it's very alarming. At this point, I would like to go to questions, and we have many. The first question I would like to direct to Mr. Sfard, because it's about Israeli civil society, and is anything happening at that level, advocating for Palestinian rights and supporting peace initiatives, and how is the Israeli civil society operating under the current conditions?
So thank you for this question. Yes, Israeli civil society has a very vibrant and professional community of organizations that work on different aspects of rights violations in the framework of the Israeli occupation and apartheid, and also the ethnic cleansing that is unfolding. These organizations, since October 7th, have been working in a very hostile environment, growingly hostile, when the Israeli right-wing government, but also Israeli right-wing activists are constantly harassing us and inciting against us. And the Israeli authorities are constantly trying to put obstacles in our work. And the Israeli court system has become less and less sympathetic to our petitions. It was always a big collaborator of the occupation and an organization authority that approved almost every policy and every practice of domination and oppression and disinheritance that the Israeli authorities have been conducting. But at least the Israeli judicial system was sometimes effective in stopping specific wrongs, and in very rare cases also stopping abusive policies. The Israeli judiciary is itself under attack by the Israeli right. It is, you know, that there is the judicial overhaul, the attempt to weaken the court. So the first victims of this campaign are the Palestinians. Providing a remedy for Palestinians is not something that you get anything in return for them politically. It's not like the Palestinians have power to protect the court. So we're seeing that the Israeli courts are less and less an arena where we can protect rights. The important thing that I want to stress is that while we are under extreme attacks, and there is a bill in the Knesset now that would basically shut down large sections of the Israeli civil society by prohibiting, in practice, prohibiting grants from foreign governments, which is a major resource for the civil society, both in Palestine and in Israel. While we are in such an attack, an attempt to silence us completely, I'm proud to say that at least this part of the Israeli society is very active, very vocal, and expresses solidarity with the Palestinian plight, and also works relentlessly to bring an end to the captivity of the Israeli hostages that are held illegally by the Hamas and other militant groups.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to take the second question to Ms. Randa Siniora. What is the call for action to governments and faith-based organizations around the world? What do you really want them to be running with on the ground. And we have in the audience with us Alice Qaisiye, and she asks about this question too. Hi, Alice. Alice is at the forefront of defending her land. She's been doing a courageous job, honestly. And she wants to know, what is the role of faith-based? And another question about governments, the actors that can really put pressure on the government of Israel. What do you want them to do?
Actually, I want to start with the governments, because already the governments know that they have legal and moral obligations under international law to respect international law. Under international humanitarian law, they have the legal obligation to respect and ensure respect, meaning that if they are signatories to the 4 Geneva Conventions, they have not only to respect the convention, but ensure other parties to the convention are respecting the convention. That's one thing. Secondly, we have already the ICJ ruling on the impact of a prolonged occupation and the General Assembly voting for ending the occupation. And therefore, we should really build on that in order to accelerate the process of ending this prolonged military occupation. It cannot go on forever. This is a temporary situation. And we know that even international humanitarian law does not address such a prolonged military occupation. We cause trouble to the ICRC in providing explanations and we know that this prolonged occupation should end. And we have a lot of legal arguments and literature that has been developed by the highest court, which is the ICJ, that we can build on. And from there to take it. I said that when I was giving my presentation, that what we saw yesterday is not a joke. What we saw yesterday is very important, because if Israel does not pay the price for the crimes, war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocidal acts that it is undertaking, it will not stop its aggression against a civilian population. We are subjected to killing and to injury and to starvation, which is a crime against humanity. So what is the international community has a moral and legal obligation to move on that, and we should build up on the momentum that we saw yesterday by the European Union and by the UK and other countries, and urge them to undertake their legal obligations under international law and make Israel pay the price. If you want to have trade agreements and you want to engage with the international community, you should respect international law. And it cannot even, what was surprising to me, some of the right-wing governments in Europe voted for considering the association agreement. The severity of the situation entails that we cannot have the leisure of waiting. We have to continue working on that and widen the first for the humanitarian aid and then complete stop of the military aggression on the Gaza Strip and a just and durable solution to be conducted. Now, for faith-based organizations, what you're doing now is very important because you're widening the circles. I think that governments cannot move unless there are, people at the grassroots and the voters in their own countries. I mean, the marches that took place, peaceful marches that took place last week in commemoration of the Nakba in Europe and in calling for ending the war on Gaza, and in Europe specifically, made the Netherlands, the UK, countries that are allies of Israel to change their positions. And therefore, the faith-based organizations, the World Council of Churches conducting this campaign from occupation to annexation is widening the knowledge and awareness of the public all over the world on the suffering of the Palestinian people and the right to self-determination. And therefore, this could really push their parliamentarians, their governments who need their votes to do something. So it is one of the major and important duty bearers. With us, we can consolidate efforts with other NGOs, international NGOs, national NGOs, all the NGOs, or all those who are working towards ending the occupation can really work together in order to come to a just and durable solution, and to prove to the world that we can find peaceful means to come to that just durable solution to the conflict, which will provide to Palestinians the right to self-determination and control of their resources on one hand, and give the security and peace to Israel as well. Only through peaceful means we can reach that end, I think.
Thank you very much. There's another question to you, and I would like to leave it to you before we go to the other question. What is your source for settlers killing people in cold blood? If you can explain what you meant by this.
Actually, I had in mind the story of a woman in the northern part of the West Bank who was harvesting her land during the olive harvest season, for example, and we were able to document this incident where she was working on her land. And there are a lot of other examples that, we have the Dawabshi family, where settlers came in and burned the mother and the father, and one of the survivors was a child completely almost burned. And we have a lot of examples of vandalism, burning agricultural land, women being very close to settlements and working on the land means that they are the direct victims. But we have also examples of, other examples that I cannot have off my head now, but when I say in cold blood, it means that there are no clashes. The people are resuming their daily life, and then they are subjected to either settler violence, sometimes with the complicity of the soldiers and the police in some areas, and other times by the soldiers themselves, who killed, for example, in Brooklyn only, this guy in cold blood. They could arrest him if they had. He was like, we saw it on TV, without doing anything, the soldiers killed that person. But whatever I speak about is always evidence-based. And when I give examples, I always, for example, we were able to document cases not only of this kind of sexual violence since 7th of October against Palestinian women, and we were able to stand solid to speak about them with the documentation that we got firsthand from women who have given their testimonies to WICLAC. So our is always verified based on evidence-based data, based on our field researchers who are working on the ground in their local communities and collecting data under clear criteria that we develop, professional criteria that we adopt.
Thank you very much. The second question is to Mr. Sfard about the right to self-defense, because Israel is saying that her actions in Gaza are in self-defense. What is self-defense under international law? And what are the obligations of the party who is conducting an act that defines as self-defense? What are the parameters?
So it seems like we have 1 minute to the scheduled webinar, and self-defense is an issue that people write PhDs about. But I nevertheless will try to say a few words about self-defense. As I mentioned, the post-Second World War international rule-based order is based on the notion that use of force is illegal in international relations. It's the first time that humanity has basically outlawed the use of force as a means to pursue interests by states or by people. There is an exception to that, and that is self-defense. If you are using force in self-defense in order to push back an attack that has been waged on you, then self-defense is permissible. But self-defense means that the actual use of force in and of itself is not illegal. It doesn't mean that the ways you use the force is legal. International law makes a distinction between the question of whether resort to force was justified and whether the conduct, the way you used the force, was legal. So going to war could be a crime because it is a war of aggression, but could be handled in ways that international laws of warfare prescribe, and vice versa. A war can be a war of self-defense that is justified, but in that war you use means that are completely illegal. You target civilians, you starve people, you bomb civilian infrastructure, you don't take, deport people or force displace them. So even if self-defense is there, and I think for one that after October 7th attack, Israel was allowed by law to use force in order to push back the attackers, definitely from its sovereign territory and to protect its citizens. But the question is not whether it was in its rights to defend itself. Of course it was. It was under obligation to defend its citizens. The question is not that. The question is what ways Israel used in this war. And this is where war crimes and crimes against humanity enter.
Thank you. The other question is, Michael, what does it take to create the transformation that we all aspire to in Israeli society, to bring about a new mindset? This is the question. And to transform Israel into a more unjust and inclusive country as well for its own citizens. What is missing? Why is it not happening?
Well, many things are missing, and we don't have the right leadership. First of all, Israeli leadership is a desert when it comes to thinking in ways that are critical of the current status quo and the current consensus in the Israeli society. Second, we need more help. I can call it pressure. I will call it help from the international community to show us what is the right way and what is the wrong way. When we commit atrocities and there is no price that is paid, I don't think there are many people in history that gave away power, land, and hegemony just because it's not nice. It is important that the international community would show us that this is not the way and incentivize those elements in the Israeli society that are aspiring for a reality in which between the river and the sea, every person, every woman, and every man have civil rights, whatever model, one state, two state. I'm not as a human rights activist, I don't care, as long as everyone have their rights. And so empowering those elements in the Israeli society that work on this is extremely important.
Thank you. And on this hopeful note of empowering people to everybody have civil rights and human rights, we have to stop there because we are already 4 minutes past our time. And I really want to thank the two distinguished panelists. Before we brought you in, we knew that you were going to do an amazing job, so I'm not surprised personally. Thank you very much. And before we conclude, I'd like to remind our audience that we have the campaign running until 11 June, and we have template letters are available, fact sheets, mini features, stories, and last but not least, we have another webinar on 5 June. It will be on accompaniment, solidarity, and the joint action needed for peace. And that will really take us more towards practical action. Finally, I would like to ask Alben, Karen, Anya, Skander, and Schneider to open their cameras so everybody will see you. They were the amazing soldiers working under the leadership of the communications department who made this run like a clock. Alben, Karen, Anya, Skander, Schneider, thank you very much. Proud of to be part of this team, and I look forward to many more action-oriented activities. Keep up the good work. Remember, the future belongs to us. Thank you all very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.